But on the third day, Kwame ran into his father's bedroom yelling, "Baba, wake up. Another cow is gone." Kwesi jolted out of bed and sprinted outside to verify the awful news. Sure enough, the number of cattle left in their little barn now stood at only 5. Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a greedy farmer named Kwesi. Kwesi spent most of his days tending to his modest farm, where he kept 8 cattle and grew crops to feed his family. Though his farm generated enough income to get by, Kwesi was not satisfied. He always kept his eye out for ways to turn extra profit. Kwesi lived with his loving wife Oma and his young-spirited son Kwame. There was always laughter and joy coming from their small home. Not far from Kwesi's homestead lived his neighbor Kofi, known around the village as a kind and generous man. Kofi's prized possession was a beautiful brown cow that produced the sweetest milk in the village. The happy cow seemed to smile as Kofi's children milked her every morning and evening. Kofi often gifted fresh milk to the sick and elderly villagers, earning much appreciation and affection. Kwesi knew all about Kofi's generous reputation and saw opportunity in his kind nature. Such a waste, giving all that fresh milk away for free, Kwesi told his wife Oma one evening. "If that cow was mine, I would sell her milk and be rich in no time." "My husband, such greed will only bring trouble," Oma gently warned. "We have enough to live happily as it is." But Kwesi dismissed his wife's caution, intent on hatching his greedy plot. The very next morning, Kwesi set off before dawn, and headed straight for Kofi's farm on the other side of the village. As he tiptoed past Kofi's hut, Kwesi crept quickly through the farmyard gates towards the barn where Kofi kept his prized cow. Kwesi slipped unnoticed into the barn. There she was, Kofi's beautiful brown milk cow peacefully sleeping, unaware of the greedy farmer plotting to uproot her from all she knew. Kwesi threw a rope around her neck and led her out quickly towards home, glancing around nervously and walking as fast as her legs could handle. By the time Kofi woke up and stepped out into the morning sunlight, Kwesi was half a mile down the road, practically sprinting with the stolen cow in tow. Kwesi hurried along the dusty road, his heart pounding, as the weight of his greed and theft settled upon him. When he arrived back home, he quickly hid Kofi's cow in his family's barn before his wife Oma or son Kwame noticed. Later that morning, when Kofi stepped out of his hut, he decided to pay a visit to his prized cow and fetch some fresh milk for his morning tea. But as he entered the barn, Kofi was shocked to find the cow's pen empty. "That is strange, where could she be?" Kofi muttered aloud, scratched his head in confusion. He did a full loop of the barn to make sure, then checked all around his property, but the cow was nowhere to be found. With panic rising up in his chest, Kofi alerted the villagers that his beloved cow was missing. Soon, Kofi's neighbors formed search parties to scout the village nearby and ask if anyone had seen the lost cow. Kwesi's son, Kwame, led his own little search crew of friends through the fields and forest. "Don't worry, Mr. Kofi, we will find her," Kwame assured the distraught farmer. But after hours of fruitless searching, no traces could be found and the cow's disappearance remained a mystery. Back on his own farm, Kwesi grew increasingly paranoid over the stolen cow. He posted his son Kwame as night watchman outside the barn, telling him, "Guard our cattle well tonight. I don't want any wandering off." Each little noise in the darkness made Kwesi jerk to attention. Deep down, the fear and guilt battling inside him were taking their toll, but the greedy farmer kept reminding himself of the big payday to come. The very next morning, Kwesi headed to the village market to sell the stolen cow for profit. As he led her down the dusty path, a few villagers eyed the cow suspiciously, whispering, "Doesn't that look like Kofi's cow?" But Kwesi kept his head down, avoiding eye contact. In his greed, he had already convinced himself that this cow now rightfully belonged to him. At the market, Kwesi sold Kofi's cow to a butcher for 2 times the normal price. His hands trembled as he pocketed the stack of bills, but his heart also quickened with excitement over his ill-begotten fortune. As soon as Kwesi returned home, he hid the money, then went over to join the other villagers still out searching for Kofi's lost cow. "Such a shame, I hope you find her soon," Kwesi said with feigned concern as he passed Kofi and his search party in the field. The normally peaceful farmer now looked lean and depressed after 2 sleepless nights of worrying. Seeing Kofi's distress firsthand pricked Kwesi's conscience, but still he remained silent, comforted by the growing stash of cash buried back home. That night, however, Kwesi received a comic surprise of his own. When Kwame did his evening cattle count in their barn, he realized one of their own cows was now missing. Kwesi felt his heart drop into his stomach. As his young son Kwame informed him, one of their family cows had mysteriously vanished from their barn. Kwesi set off immediately to count and recount all his cattle, panicking more after each count yielded the same result. Only 6 remained, where once there were 7. "It has to be somewhere nearby," Kwesi muttered, trying to convince himself as much as his son. So Kwame faithfully kept watch outside the barn, while his father paced around inside, too anxious and guilt-ridden over his own thievery to sleep. The next morning, Kwesi went out early on another extensive search, scouring every field nearby. But the lost cow was nowhere to be found. Returning home exhausted and dismayed, Kwesi encountered his neighbor Kofi, walking slowly up the road, still searching day and night for his own stolen cow. The 2 neighbors briefly made sorrowful eye contact before quickly looking away without a word. Both had now experienced the same sense of loss and confusion over their missing livestock. Over the next few nights, Kwesi posted Kwame again on night watch duty outside the family barn. But on the 3rd day, Kwame ran into his father's bedroom yelling, "Baba, wake up. Another cow is gone." Kwesi jolted out of bed and sprinted outside to verify the awful news. Sure enough, the number of cattle left in their little barn now stood at only 5. At this point, Kwesi felt totally perplexed and devastated by the mysteriously missing cows. His wife Oma tried consoling him, but he just paced around, consumed with panic and fury over being targeted by some unknown cow thief. "It's not your fault, my husband," Oma assured him. "We must remain strong." But inwardly Kwesi felt plagued by guilt. He recognized this sudden violence against his own livestock as karma for stealing Kofi's cow. But his intense pride kept these thoughts silent inside, continuing to wage war against his conscience. Kwesi barely slept, patrolling his barn ceaselessly, trying to catch whoever kept stealing his cows. Exhausted, paranoid, and emotionally frayed, he started questioning everyone in the village, searching for any clues about his family's missing cows. But all his investigation led nowhere. Then tragedy struck again for Kwesi exactly 1 week after he had stolen Kofi's cow. When Kwesi and his son went out to lock the barn one evening, they discovered a third cow gone, leaving them with just 4. It was now obvious to everyone, these cow disappearances were directly targeting Kwesi. Rumors began to spread that the greedy farmer was cursed. People in the village started avoiding him, as Kwesi grew increasingly angry, trying to solve the mystery cow thefts while also safeguarding his remaining livestock. After 2 more sleepless nights, which he posted outside, vainly standing guard, Kwesi decided he would stay up keeping watch over every one of his 4 remaining cows till dawn. But about halfway through the night, he started nodding off despite his best efforts. When Kwesi jerked awake at daybreak, his groggy eyes slowly focused on a 5th missing cow. Now only 3 remained. Reeling in despair, Kwesi knew he must have briefly dozed off and failed his watch duty. He let out an enraged cry that echoed across the village. Then suddenly something dawned on him. As Kwesi sank to his knees, in exhaustion and despair, the realization fully set in: the serial cow thefts targeting his farm were divine retribution for when he stole Kofi's cow. His own greed and deception had returned to ravage everything he valued. When Kwesi's wife Oma emerged later that morning to check on him, she found her husband slumped on the ground staring vacantly at his 3 remaining cows with tears streaming down his hollow cheeks. Speechless, Oma helped Kwesi inside to rest. The villagers gossiped about the pitiful condition of the once boastful farmer Kwesi. Greed has brought him ruin, the villagers whispered. His wicked schemes have turned back on him. Even Kwesi's son Kwame felt confused and ashamed of his father. Stealing only breeds more stealing, Kwame's best friend told him. Your father's karma has come back on you both. Laying sleepless on his mat each night, Kwesi wrestled with what his wife, neighbors, and even young Kwame seemed to understand, that his greed and theft had been not only illegal but also immoral. He had brought this calamity upon himself and his family. Finally one evening, Kwame cautiously entered the bedroom where his father had been hiding in dismay for days. Father, was stealing Kofi's cow really worth it? The perceptive boy asked. The other villagers now mock and avoid us. Kwesi had no words of defense, as the truth sank in. The next morning, after much thought, Kwesi woke Oma early, and asked her to fetch coffee. When the kind-hearted neighbor arrived, Kwesi started apologizing and begging for forgiveness. Stunned, Kofi slowly helped the broken farmer to his feet. My friend, what grieves you so? Kofi gently asked. Mustering his courage, Kwesi confessed everything, how his greedy scheming and theft of Kofi's cow has brought disaster in retaliation. Now with all his pride finally crushed, Kwesi yielded himself to justice. But I aim to make things right, he vowed. I will work any type of labor, until I can buy you a new cow. Kwesi pleaded for mercy and forgiveness. Kofi stared in stunned silence, processing this revelation. Then to Kwesi's amazement, Kofi extended his arm to raise up the fallen farmer once more. Let us forgive one another, Kofi proposed, a wise smile breaking through his shocked dismay. The 2 men embraced like reunited brothers. Though Kofi graciously forgave his repentant neighbor, Kwesi vowed to make full compensation for the losses. The very next morning, he rose early and gathered 3 large sacks overflowing with crops from his fields. Kwesi took his peace offerings over to Kofi's homestead, and poured out the valuable crops before him. Please accept this as payment until I can replace your car fully, Kwesi pledged. Kofi smiled warmly and replied, "You have already given me the greatest gift, our friendship." But Kwesi insisted on redeeming his promise, so the men agreed Kofi would hold the crops until Kwesi could buy him a new cow. Energized by his newfound purpose, Kwesi spent every free moment working odd jobs and selling valuables trying to fund his debt. Within a couple of months, Kwesi returned to Kofi's farm at daybreak, leading a beautiful new brown cow. "Her milk is the sweetest in all the land," he declared with pride. Kofi embraced Kwesi again in celebration, while neighboring villagers broke into cheers, amazed by such transformation in one they had all scorned so recently. As word spread of Kwesi's repentance, former friends started visiting him again. "We rejoice in your change of heart," the villagers declared. Even young Kwame regained his joy and sprang around the homestead once more. One evening, Kwame asked his father, "What made you confess your lying and stealing, Baba?" Gone was the arrogant, greedy farmer Kwame once knew. In his place sat a humble soul full of wisdom. "I learned the value of peace with my brothers," Kwesi replied. "When I stole from another, I lost peace within myself also. But when I repaid my debt, all was restored. Our friendship, my honor and my happy home." Kwame's eyes grew wide with awe and insight. Kwesi placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. "Remember my lesson well, little one. Greed only breeds more greed, while contentment yields peace of mind." You see, this story teaches us that greed leads to sorrow, but making things right brings joy. When we steal from others, we steal our own peace of mind. It also highlights that contentment is key. Be contented with what you have. Be happy for what you have, for no condition is permanent. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell for more stories like this one. Goodbye.